Hello and welcome to Hysteria. I'm Erin Ryan.
And I'm Alyssa Mastromonaco.
Okay, Alyssa, news this week. Jeff Bezos sent a giant penis to space after Richard Branson sent a rocket that looks less like a penis to space last week. Both billionaires are getting a lot of attention in the news media for their space flights, much of it fawning. Alyssa, will this attention finally be enough to fill whatever black hole exists in the soul of every billionaire that makes it impossible for them to understand the concept of enough? Why or why not?
No, I mean, I feel very conflicted about all the space news. But as it relates to their personal egos, it's not enough. The fawning, the Jeff Bezos, and also, why did anybody fall for the trick of the $100 million? Why do we care? I don't care that he's giving $100 million to Van Jones to do whatever Van Jones is going to do with the money. I care a little bit more about Jose Andres because he is a stellar and amazing human being who will do great things with it. But I don't know, it's kind of like he heard that people all week were like, fuck Jeff Bezos and his penis ship going up. And he was like, I'm going to throw a kicker in my press conference and I'm going to give away $200 million for people to do good with because I like harmony and I like people who can disagree without being disagreeable. And literally when he said all of that, I was like, you're just mad people made fun of your ship. This is crazy.
Right. Also, lest we forget, his ex-wife, Mackenzie Scott, is whooping his ass when it comes to being a likable billionaire. She has given away so much more money.
To real things.
And
doesn't do a CNN show every time she does it.
No, she sends out, she does what a self-respecting philanthropist should do and sends out a press release.
Exactly.
Which is like, okay, fine. I mean, yeah, you don't have to be an anonymous donor and that's fine. But Jeff Bezos, I don't know. I feel like billionaires should not be going to space because it seems like a really super villainy flaunting of a wealth that they built with the blood as mortar on the bricks of, their mansions. And it just seems gross.
So yes, I agree with you on that. However, I do think that we need more money spent figuring out space. Back in the 1960s, 4.5% of the federal budget went to NASA. And now only 0.48% of the federal budget goes to NASA. So I feel like, and especially in the 80s when things caught fire and blew up and shit, people were like, don't send our money to space anymore. But I do think that it is important, since the current Earth is burning and flooding everywhere, that we figure out what's going on elsewhere. So I am glad that this is happening. I don't think he should get Nobel Peace Prize credit for it, which is what he seems to be pining after. All of them do. But I am glad that we're learning that this is, the technologies that they have pioneered are important. The reusable booster. Every time a rocket went up into space, it never was used again. And now we may actually discover more things. And so I am glad for that. I think they should give all the technology to the U.S. government, and be like, here you go. We did this for you.
They're not going to give it to the U.S. government.
No, they're not. But what I'm saying is that would be the right thing.
They don't even give what they're supposed to give to the U.S. government.
This is my other point. I am mad that he does not pay taxes. I am also mad that a sticking point for Republicans in the current infrastructure bill is that they don't want to give more money to the IRS for tax enforcement. What the fuck? I just want people to pay the taxes they're supposed to pay. I'm not asking for people to pay more. Just pay your fucking fair share. So Republicans, I think it's hilarious because most of them are not so rich that they're doing this for themselves. They're literally just doing it to own the libs. I don't know. But that made me mad too.
They're doing it to curry favor with these billionaires who they hope will throw them some crumbs. They're debasing themselves for the smallest segment of billionaire favor. Here's the thing that I come down on another side of this. I don't think we need to be focusing on sending human beings to space. I think we should be devoting a lot more resources to discovery. I agree with that. But I don't know that sending a human being physically into space is the best mechanism for discovery. Like we should be, satellites, telescopes, like instruments to measure different forms of energy that we're just now beginning to understand. Those things don't require us to send fucking Jeff Bezos' dick into space.
No, I agree. I don't need Jeff Bezos in space. I just feel like if they're spending money to develop technology, that's fine. He just shouldn't get like Nobel Peace Prize level attention for it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I also think that what are these billionaires going to do with their technology to go to space? Because we know they're not going to be benevolent with it because they've never been benevolent about anything ever. They're not going to share it with people who are doing research anymore in any way that is going to endanger their ability to make profit. They want to do space mining. They want to do $100,000 tourist trips to space. They want to do all this dumb bullshit that is not really that helpful to humanity right now.
Yeah, I don't understand the space tourism of it all. That doesn't make sense. But then again, it's I'm not mad about fucking Carnival cruises. I don't know. I just feel very conflicted about all of it.
I'm mad about Carnival cruises. I think cruises they're floating germ vessels.
Well, no, I agree. Yes, I completely agree. But I'm just I don't know. I guess if there's some good that can come from it, that's great. I just don't think that they should be lauded, conquering heroes when, come on now.
Billionaires shouldn't exist. Jeff Bezos is a terrible person.
He is a terrible person who honestly also cannot handle adrenaline because he was acting a fool yesterday.
Yeah. Well, no matter how much you have, if you just lack the ability to know when is enough, or if you lack the ability to be satisfied, you're just going to live a life of sucking emptiness. And
the one end part yesterday that I also thought was quite funny is when Wally Funk, who was fucking high on life when she came back down from the stars, she kept saying, I want to go back. I want to go back soon.
I want to go again fast.
Let me tell you something. If he doesn't send her back again, she's going to have words. And I found that whole thing just very funny because she was dead fucking serious that she wants to go back. So I hope she harasses him till the end of time and gets to go back.
Let Wally Funk go to space. All she wants. She can go to space tomorrow again if she wants to do that. That's totally fine with me. But Jeff Bezos can take several seats. Okay, I want to talk really briefly about a story that is every single time I read about this, I am shocked by the magnitude of the problem because I am not personally dealing with the problem. I'm lucky that I am not. But U.S. overdose deaths hit a record in the pandemic year last year. 93,000 people died of drug overdoses last year. And meanwhile, while this stat is floating around, we are right now in the midst of opioid distributors settling a New York lawsuit for $1.1 billion. Alyssa, does that seem like enough money for how many people they've killed?
$1.1 billion is a pittance compared to what they made perpetrating this whole fucking scheme. But it's something, and it'll go to the people and the communities who need it. And at least some of these companies are ponying up at this point. Others, Purdue Pharma, are still trying to claim bankruptcy so they can get out of some of these cases, which is appalling. And I think we know that AG Tish James will not stand for that, and she is fighting it. But I am glad that at least, over the course, and it's you have to read the fine print and everything, the $1.1 billion will be dispersed over 17 years.
That's not even an NBA player's salary. That's not even a single NBA player's salary.
And that's garbage. But at least they are starting to pay, which sends a signal to people doing shitty things right now that they may have to pay at some point. So I guess we'll take it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is incredibly shitty to me that people cannot erase their student loan debts by declaring bankruptcy, but companies that killed hundreds of thousands of people, if not more, and ruined millions and millions of lives can try to declare bankruptcy to get out of having to reckon with that
totally
financially.
Hey, look, they learned it from watching Donald Trump.
Yeah. I bet Liz Warren, former bankruptcy professor at Harvard Law School, has some thoughts about this. But yeah. Okay, really quick. Let's end on a high note before we get to our space-themed interview guest. Child tax credit. It's hitting people's accounts.
Bank accounts.
This month. So families now receive up to $300 per child under 6 and $250 per child under 18 for every month through the end of the year. It's not really like a paycheck for having children, which is like how Fox News is trying to position it, which is very weird. It's just like a pre-rebate on your taxes because you're going to get that money back anyway. Hey, it's a start. $300 for a kid under 6 per month. That's like diapers, right?
That is diapers, which is like what people are doing with the money.
Yeah. They're using it to help take care of their children. And that is probably what we should be doing more of, is giving people money and having those people use that money in a way that is directly beneficial to what it's supposed to benefit.
And I think everyone would benefit from hearing folks who are receiving this money talk about how the fact that the $300 or the $250 feels akin to life-changing money. That means we must do better.
Right. I mean, I think about right now, like trying to budget for like being a parent starting in like October, November this year. And like, and taking a look at how everything costs, like, dude, free diaper, having the cost of diaper related stuff paid for every month is huge.
Formula. I mean, there are so many things that should be less expensive, but since they aren't, this seems like a decent start.
Yes, it totally is. And also shouts to Rosa DeLauro, who has been one of the architects of this. Like, we need to have her back on the show with her purple hair to talk about
And she can tell us more about why this should 100% be made permanent.
Yes. Okay, we got to get her back on the show. And one more thing, young people in Georgia and Florida are activating to fight against redistricting that is partisan and that silences their voices. And I know we don't have enough time to give them the airtime that they're due for the amount of work they're doing, but shouts to the young people in Florida and Georgia who are activated and trying to preserve their voice in their democracies.
Absolutely.
Alyssa, I love it when the stars align for us.
It's so rare that our stars align.
I feel like this week the stars really aligned because we have those billionaires doing their space tomfoolery, but we also have this guest lined up that is somebody who knows a ton about space, who we've wanted to have on the show for a while. So I'm going to introduce her. Today, we are honored to welcome Dr. Chanda Prescod-Weinstein. She is a theoretical and astrophysicist, a feminist theorist, and author of The Disordered Cosmos, A Journey into Dark Matter, Space-Time, and Dreams Deferred, a book that occasionally made me feel like I was breaking my brain or hallucinating. And that is a huge compliment for the record. That is exactly what I look for in a book. I want to feel like I'm on mushrooms as I'm reading. She is an assistant professor of physics and a faculty member in the Women's Studies Department at the University of New Hampshire. Welcome, Dr. Prescod-Weinstein.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
We are so glad to have you. In your book, you talk about growing up with a love for science and learning, and obviously an aptitude for both. Was there a moment when you were a kid or young adult when you felt like you fell in love with theoretical physics?
When I was 10, my mom took me to see a documentary about Stephen Hawking directed by Errol Morris called A Brief History of Time. And I had to be kind of dragged to see the documentary. I think it made me miss like X-Men cartoons, which I was really big on the X-Men cartoon. And halfway through the documentary, I put all the pieces together that I could get paid to do math for a living and that this math described the universe. And as a working class kid who really liked math, this seemed like a good arrangement to be able to just do math all day and get paid and not have to worry about money anymore. So that was it. I was sold. I sent Stephen Hawking an email maybe a year later asking how to become a theoretical physicist. And one of his graduate students replied and explained it to me. And I've been kind of following that roadmap ever since then.
Oh my God. What are you working on right now that you're most excited about? And is it possible to explain it to Erin and I?
Oh man, this is I wish I had been prepared for this question. It's always so hard to make choices. This morning, I just gave 2 lectures, an introduction to astrophysics and an introduction to cosmology to the African School of Physics. And it was super fun putting that together, but also such a reminder that choices are difficult for me because I'm so excited about so many different things. But one of the things that I didn't get to talk about either really in the book or in the talks this morning was about neutron stars. So neutron stars are what we call stellar remnants. I like to call them star skeletons or dead stars. So they're something that you get after a star goes supernova. So after a very massive star explodes, it can leave behind this neutron star core that is basically neutron quark stew, very condensed. If you took the mass of the sun and squeezed it into Los Angeles, it's very, very dense, very, very massive. And I like them because they are good particle physics laboratories. And I'm thinking about what happens if you put dark matter inside of them. So that's something I'm really excited about right now.
I followed that.
I did too. Also, I feel like that's probably why you're a teacher, because that is a very complicated topic that I felt like I sort of followed. Also, picturing skeleton stars made the universe seem very spooky to me. Okay, so let's talk about the world you're working within. So in the book, you write a lot about this, and this is something that you talk a lot about on your social media. So can you share with our listeners just how big of an issue is a lack of diversity in STEM, and how does homogeneity in an academic discipline do a disservice to people from diverse backgrounds who could and would contribute, if not for the, and I believe this is an academic term, bullshit? And what needs to happen for things to improve?
Often when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in science, it gets framed through the lens of what is the damage that is done to science by what if that's the kid that could solve the cosmic acceleration problem, but instead he doesn't have enough to eat, and that tends to be the way that we think about it. And I just want to say one of the problems with this framing, of course, and this is why I'm glad actually you asked a different question, but one of the problems with this framing is that it articulates that kid, his entire value becomes through the lens of what his labor could provide to science. And, in the context of American traditions around thinking of certain people's value through the value that their labor can provide, this is particularly a bad thing, to talk about Black people as the primary value, right, as a labor source. We've been there trying to get out of that, still not really out of that, working on it, right? And so I do really think that the thing that we should be thinking about is the harm to that child of not being able to experience fulfilling their humanity, their curiosity, being curious about the stars, being curious about the universe. And when someone says neutron star and you get really excited about hearing the word neutron star, feeling like you have the resources and the opportunity and the time to be curious. So, not being hungry helps. Having your insulin helps. All of these things really help. So I think that the damage really is to our humanity and to our ability to experience ourselves as fully human, and whether we are treating each other as if we are all fully human.
Chanda, who is an under-celebrated figure in physics or in STEM in general that more people should know about?
So one person I talk about in the book is Elmer Imes. So Elmer was the second African American to earn a PhD in physics from the University of Michigan. And he, for his dissertation work and afterwards, did work that confirmed that quantum mechanics was a thing, basically. So this is in 1918. So this is right as people are starting to try and figure out, is this quantum mechanics thing, what's happening here? And his experimental work affirmed that quantum mechanics was needed to explain the data that we were getting. And so Elmer Imes is someone who I think is not widely known. The way that physics students learn history of physics is basically through anecdotes in our textbooks and classes. And I never saw his name in a textbook as a student. I never heard a professor talk about him. The way that I learned about him is because within the Black physics community, we have our own sort of cultural knowledge, but that knowledge hasn't been brought out into the open. And so I would love to hear more discussion about Elmer Imes as an example. And one of the reasons that I think people should also be interested in Elmer Imes is that he was married to Nella Larsen, the author of the great Harlem Renaissance novel Passing, which was recently turned into a film starring Tessa Thompson, right? So he's an interesting cultural figure for that reason alone. He also went on to found the physics department at Fisk University. And so for those of us in the Black community, the Black physics community, I think that pretty much all of us in some way can trace our intellectual heritage back to Elmer Imes and the impact that the Fisk physics department has had on Black physicists through the last century.
And you're talking about the Black physics community. I would love to hear more about that. Like, how large is the Black physics community? Is it growing? And do you guys get together and hang out, or is it sort of more of a like virtual pen pals type situation? Describe like what that community looks like and how it functions.
Yeah, so in the 1970s, just as the first African-American women were earning PhDs in physics, a group got together and formed an organization called the National Society of Black Physicists. And I really came up in that organization. I, for 15 years, was the chair of the Cosmology and Gravitation Committee. And with the exception of a few years, there's been a conference every year where people get together. And it's been a really important opportunity for students to meet other students like them. Black students who are at historically Black colleges get to meet other Black physics students. But for those of us who don't go to HBCUs, sometimes going to a meeting like NSBP is like the first time that we meet like a Black student who does physics. So for me, NSBP has been historically really important. Right now, I'm focusing a lot of my energies on African-American women in physics and Incorporated, which obviously is focusing specifically on Black women in physics. And one of the comments I want to make about that is patriarchy doesn't have a color line. And so that's certainly like, a struggle that we have in dealing with gender issues. African-American women in physics, there are about 100 of us with PhDs from departments of physics. And I just want to situate that number in context. There are 2,000 PhDs granted in physics in the United States every year. And in the last 50 years, since the first one was granted to a Black woman, under 100 have gone to Black American women. So our PhD numbers are very small. At the bachelor's level, unfortunately, the number of Black students earning bachelor's degrees in physics has leveled off and has declined somewhat over the last 15 years. And if you ask what's happening there, historically Black colleges have been closing their physics departments because they can't afford to keep them open. And predominantly white institutions are not picking up the slack. And that really points to a need to send resources to HBCUs.
That's super interesting. So we want to end on a little bit of a light note. What do you do to decompress? And since your job is your brain, do you have any truly mindless hobbies?
I watch a lot of reality TV.
What are you into?
I have really strong opinions about this week's episode of The Bachelorette. I have really strong opinions about 90 Day Fiancé.
Oh, I could go on forever.
Married at First Sight Australia and Married at First Sight US. Also, actually, I speak Dutch, and so also Married at First Sight Netherlands. I have.
Oh my God.
It's so fascinating. Like on the American version, like they include people of color, but there are no queer people. On the Dutch version, there are gay people, but no people of color. And on the Australian version, there's like a lot of Botox and filler, a lot of Botox and filler. Huh. So yeah, I guess I don't know. I'm giving you a whole analysis, so I'm not sure it's totally brainless. There's a lot of reality TV in our household. I also just want to shout out the podcast Drunk Librarians. I really like Drunk Librarians.
That sounds like just a fun activity in general. Yeah. The reality TV thing is so interesting to me because I think a lot of smart, very smart women that I know love reality TV. And I don't think that it's totally mindless. I think that it invites like reflection and like analysis, even though the product itself might be kind of not necessarily high art, the like thought process can like really get you thinking about things. And I've fallen behind on this season of The Bachelorette, and I'm feeling maybe like I should have. Is it good?
I recommend getting back into it. I will say that this season I'm late to the game. I grew up with The Real World. And so I was kind of a purist about reality shows. And I thought like all of the like post real world stuff was kind of like crap and it was like really bad. And I refused to watch reality TV. And then, basically because like it's hard to watch TV without it because there's so much now, I kind of gave in. I came to The Bachelorette late. This is the first season where I feel like I can see the connections and the connections make sense to me. And also I don't hate most of the guys that she is keeping.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So I won't give away why that's the case, but I actually think I don't know how I feel about the hosting. I think I could do without I don't know, maybe I'm not enough of a high femme for like the girl talk style thing that they're doing.
Well, because it's still so stilted.
Yeah. And they're like trying to fake this friendship. And I'm like, you guys aren't, I don't know. It doesn't seem, I don't know. There's something weird about it.
But is there anything higher femme than being able to tell when a relationship is not genuine? I think that's maybe the highest femme of all, of like picking up on that.
I would say like as a queer person who often like had difficulties understanding some of the dynamics between like the girls around me when I was like growing up, that the other thing that happens is that you spend a lot of time like observing and trying to figure out what's going on as kind of an outsider. And so I think like I have that kind of outsider point of view of I see these dynamics. I could not plug into them in any natural way, but I recognize it.
Right. And that, you know what, that actually sounds like something that would really serve you well as a scientist. Like standing from like understanding that you are outside of it and that the like what you are swimming in isn't necessary. Like, you know what I mean? Like noticing what's around you rather than just accepting it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something I can't even paraphrase it very well, but I quote Alice Walker in the book talking about the value of the outsider's perspective that loneliness has actually taught her and how much that even seeing that line taught me as a Black queer person in physics. Even as a very light-skinned one, I'm feeling like an outsider in different ways and dealing with homophobia and dealing with racism and dealing with sexism and dealing with sometimes those things happening within the communities that I was looking to for support. Mm-hmm. That loneliness can give you a valuable outsider perspective. I hope that we can maintain that in science, but without the shitty like loneliness part.
Right. Loneliness as an asset, like solitude as an asset versus loneliness as an affliction.
Yes.
Dr. Chanda Prescod-Weinstein, thank you so much for joining us. This was great. We could sit around talking about the way that everything kind of flows together from reality TV to neutron stars and the quark soup that they are.
Thanks so much for having me.